Home for BamaOnLine.com. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BOL, alongside recruiting analyst Joseph Hastings. And of course, down there in the center square, our publisher, Tim Watts. It is a Monday, fellows. July the 1st, 2024, a June for the record books, I think, in a lot of ways when you talk about Alabama football recruiting. So we'll get into a lot of that, obviously, on today's program. We'll look ahead, too, because it doesn't appear as if the news is going to slow down anytime soon. And as always, we appreciate the viewers out there, our subscribers at BamaOnline.com tuning in. We've got, here we go, guys. We got Hookin' and Bookin' Bros checking in from Boise, Idaho. We got Jeff Stapleton from Valley Grande, Alabama. Says the cold summer keeps making the haters. Again, more Jeff, more Tony here with a Roll Tide Roll. How about Uncle Bob, Tim Watts? We can always
Uncle
count
Bob
on
is
Uncle
a
Bob.
staple.
He is a
I,
staple.
I don't know if he was the first one to follow us every day or Tara Whittle.
Tara's up
Tex
there.
Tider. Tex Tider. He's actually going to the bathroom at work on his breaks to watch us. He sneaks his computer in and makes work. So
Yeah, that's a
appreciate all
visual.
you. We
Yeah,
appreciate all y'all for being here. Thank you so much.
that's a Monday morning visual for sure. Jor, SEC Shorts is gold once again. You'll have to check that out. There's Bob. Jay checking in from Haleyville, Alabama. You know what Haleyville, Alabama is the home of, right? Guthrie's Chicken Tenders. That's
The
right.
original.
They're
The original.
original. Yeah, I went to UA with Hud Guthrie back in the day, one of the Guthries. So Jackson checking in. He says he joined Tim BOL this weekend for only $1. This sounds like a smart guy.
He
He
took the
says this team
promo.
is his team is definitely worth the 100 cents. It sounds a lot better, doesn't it, Joe?
Yeah.
When you kind of put it as 100 cents.
I love it. I like that. Jackson, glad to have you on board. Thank you for joining.
Uh, the Moon checking in here. RTR from Loxley, Alabama. We got a New York City viewer right here, Tim Watson. Peasy gets the
Love New
roll
York
tide
City,
roll.
Peasy. Hope you're having fun
Yes.
up there. Hope it's cool. So much to
Yeah.
do.
I'd love to be at the bagel shop in
Uh,
Williamsburg right now.
thing about New York that's amazing is how cheap you can eat great food. Like most cities aren't like that, but
Get out of
you,
Times Square. Hell yeah, right?
I mean,
Mhm.
even the $5 pizza slices are amazing.
That's
You
the
know,
borrow. It's
yeah.
classic. Steve Murray 19. He wishes us a good morning. We appreciate that, Steve. Hayden checking in, Michael checking in again. We appreciate each and every one of you. Man, this roll call is something else this morning. And again, Tim, it's been an amazing June in a lot of ways for Alabama football recruiting under Kalen DeBoer. It's also a sign of the times and how much the calendar has changed, as we know, with official visits. June, it's like January, I call it, because it used to be January, but now it feels like it's shifted to June. Let's just get into the last week, even, Tim, and just the decisions that were made over the last 6 or 7 days. Of course, Dijon Lee, a huge one for the Alabama Crimson Tide, the 5-star corner from Southern California. Josiah Sharma, we had talked about Alabama and Texas, it seemed like. Oregon was in that mix, but how about that one and how that played out with the Ducks, Tim?
Yeah, it's kind of a tough loss for Alabama because they were in there so long with Josiah Sharma. They had him committed. He was a 3-star. He didn't have a lot of offers, didn't have a lot of attentions. Alabama offered. He came like February, March, and April, I believe. He came here to visit Alabama. Loved the Bama staff. Had a great relationship. But I mean, he's a big time defensive tackle. Texas really, really kind of set this thing in motion because they needed defensive tackles. They lost another one the same day, I believe, to FSU. So they were trying to get some priority defensive tackles, replacing Bo Davis. Not an easy thing. I think people are realizing that. And that NIL got involved, and Texas was the team to beat. And then the next morning, everybody's like, Oregon, Phil Knight. I think Phil Knight was the first to say it, Oregon.
Oregon's
And
got bags on
yeah,
bags, man.
well, Texas, I think to
Texas
me,
does too. Yeah.
everybody's got bags, but you have to balance your money bag wise. Like defensive tackle's not a priority for Alabama this year or next year.
Sure.
It's always a priority, but it's not a desperation. Apparently, Texas lost a couple guys to the NFL. We're pushing hard, and Oregon wants to make a big splash. Man, they invested a lot in Dan, so
Mhm.
it was a good battle. I was glad we were on the outside watching it.
But you don't want to undervalue, right, Joseph, the pickup of Dawson Merritt and kind of what that means for this Alabama defense. And we'll be talking about some more defensive guys as we go throughout the program today. But again, as a recap, that was a big pickup too.
Yeah, that was an interesting recruitment because we thought the decision could have been made a little bit earlier than it was. We were talking about that maybe late April timeline, sometime in the spring. He ended up pushing it back, took that official visit to Alabama June 7th through the 9th, but it was a huge pickup. Nebraska was very much in that, in the mix for him, and he was considering them, and but Alabama stayed with it throughout the entire process. And we've talked about it before, but the pursuit made by Christian Robinson, outside linebackers coach, and the relationship he established with Merritt and his family was exceptional. But he's a kid with high football pedigree. His dad has coached in the NFL for quite some time. I believe he's been a part of 5 Super Bowl winning coaching staffs with the New York Giants and the Kansas City Chiefs, as their defensive backs coach. So he's got the football pedigree, and Alabama just kind of checked off all the boxes from a development standpoint, relationship standpoint, and just the feel on campus. So huge pickup for Alabama.
No doubt about it. And boy, Tim, sort of the after effects of Dijon Lee and how that's resonated for this Alabama class, which now sits at number 2 in the country for the 2025 cycle, according to the On3 rankings. That was the one a lot of people were sort of, budding. They were, Alabama's recruiting at a high level, but where's this sitting 5-star? When's that going to happen? And so that question got answered, and it could be that 1 or 2 more are on the way.
Yeah, the thing with Dijon was like we always felt like Alabama did a good job. Relationship was there, coming over with Courtney Morgan and Kalen DeBoer. Then he's building a relationship with Mo Lindquist. We always felt pretty good. Again, there was that run, and there seems to be that run at some point. I don't know if it's theatrics or heartstrings or what. But even with Dawson Merritt, everybody sort of pushed Nebraska to the lead. I mean, there's a thread of, well, there he goes. Let's try to get somebody else. I mean, the first signs of adversity, people will bail at every site on those guys. But Dawson and with Dijon, it was literally, oh, well, Georgia wants him. He got him. Georgia did want him. They did not get him. He committed to Alabama. He was a priority for Georgia. They were all in there. Alabama was all in as well. Both of them were doing what they had to do. That was the main 2. Texas was a school that loved him. Oregon, there's a lot of schools that really like Dijon. So it was a big one, and it was 2 of those guys basically at different points, 6 weeks, 2 months before their decision. Alabama fans thought they had just passed. But look, recruiting's a roller coaster, especially because the most random, and I mean random, person can put in a prediction or a veiled a hint that something's happening and everybody runs with it. But I think if you just stick steady, which is what we do at BamaOnLine, we just follow the flow the whole time and stay steady, just like with Sharma. We never said he was a lock. We said it was getting heated. I think people wanted it to be a lock because of the relationship, but it was getting interesting down the stretch. Now, I'm not sure we knew how interesting it was going to be. I ran to Jersey Mike's, and forget what Joe was doing and Andrew. We were all doing something else, and I got a screenshot, or they sent it to me, and I'm calling like, holy crap, they're predicting Oregon. We're all like in scramble mode, like what's going on? At that point, we're just fans watching to see how recruitment goes.
Yeah, I think maybe Joseph was at Jimmy John's. You were at the other spot, and you just didn't kind of cross paths there.
Public subs. I get public subs.
Pub subs. I mean, shout out, no doubt about it. Those chicken.
Let me add too that I did get to speak with Dijon Lee last night, so stay tuned to BamaOnLine.com for that article. And look, Alabama's done really well recruiting the California kids, and I love it. But I just did a midnight interview with him last night because of that time difference. I had Jackson Lloyd one time texting me at 3:30 in the morning my time, so it gets a little bit hectic with the West Coast kids out there.
You know what? We also want to remind you, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel here as of yet, you need to do that right now. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on those notifications. You'll get all of this YouTube content as it drops right here on the YouTube home for BamaOnLine.com. If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and hit that like button for us right now. A little thumbs up would help us out, and we would appreciate that tremendously as well. And as we heard earlier from Jackson, We still have that $1 special going on right now at BamaOnline.com. That's right. Sign up, new subscribers, $1 for the first month. You're not going to beat that deal anywhere. Unparalleled, unsurpassed coverage of the Alabama Crimson Tide right there at BamaOnline.com, the roundtable message board. I mean, that thing just stays popping and stays hot. So
Yeah, there's a lot of activity. Those guys, they'll catch you at 2 a.m. They try to
no,
catch us sleeping, but we almost work in shifts. They don't know I rarely sleep. I'm up late and then I'm up early. So you
yeah,
gotta
and
watch those guys.
I mean, you see all these people checking in from all over the world too. So there's
Yeah.
literally people up around the world paying attention to the Alabama
Last
Crimson
show
Tide.
we had a guy from Japan. I
Yeah,
was like,
exactly.
whoa, what's going
Now,
on over there?
now, do you wonder if some of these people are really in Japan, though, Tim? Have you ever wondered about
No,
that a little bit, or you just take them? You got to take them at their face value.
because his time, he's like 14 hours ahead. We're doing the 9. I
Yeah,
mean, that was 11
11 p.m.
a.m.
Yeah,
yeah.
11
Yeah,
We did the time check on
yeah,
Jermaine
he was
too, and
he
he
was
did it. He
he
answered
was
it
in
good.
the yeah, he was in. If they're not, then they're wishing they were there, and that's half the problem. We'll give them the credit.
Oh gosh. And it is July the 1st, by the way. You know what happened 21 years ago today? I lost my mind and jumped on board at BOL with that
Yeah,
guy in
happy
the
anniversary.
yeah, I'm still waiting on a watch or something, maybe a pin. I don't know.
I didn't even ask him. He just
Maybe
showed up.
maybe I'll just buy myself another hat, to
Travis just showed up
commemorate.
and said, "I'm here." I said, "All right, buddy."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Our initials rhyme.
Hey, it hasn't
TRTW.
felt, it doesn't feel a day over 50 years. It really doesn't. I got to say, it still
Joseph's
feels
like,
fresh.
"Shut up, Travis. It's been a lot longer for me. It's been a year."
Poor Joseph. It's been dog years. Hey, Joseph, let's talk about sort of this wide net that the Alabama staff has cast with here in this recruiting cycle. And it's been hectic. It's been, as you can attest to, Tim, Andrew Bone, it's been crazy in a lot of ways. But I want to say somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 dozen official visitors since Kalen DeBoer has taken over. But it's hard to argue with the success rate, the hit rate with which they've been able to get to this 20 commitment mark.
Do we
Yeah,
not have that at Joseph? Do we not have that at 47 official visitors?
Yeah,
Is that what we counted it at?
right
47.
about.
yeah, every single weekend had at least 10 official visitors, and then you had the 2 midweek with Caleb Edwards and Kalik Lockett. So, yeah, it was a very productive month for Alabama. Doubled the commitment total in this class, going from 10 to 20. And look, we knew they were going to get commitments. Obviously, Andrew Bone talks about his 19 and a half over every single show, so I'll mention it here since he's not here. But, yeah. We knew they were going to get commitments in the summer. Like, with the way Alabama had been recruiting to that point, the kind of surge that they had in the spring, it wasn't too much of a surprise. Once again, I think for me, it's just the how quick they got them, and also the fact that the kids shut down their visits afterwards. We had some take it out until the end, like Dijon Lee take his official visits. We had Chuck McDonald cancel officials to Georgia, Oregon, and USC. Jackson Lloyd cancel official to USC. London Simmons cancel official to Arkansas. Just, all these kids got into the fold early. And the biggest of them all, Keelan Russell, committing at the time that he did. Him getting in the fold at that point on June 4th, paved the way for Kalik Lockett to take that official visit and for him to recruit some guys. And, it was just massive to get him in this class at the time that they did. So, yeah, it was just a really productive month for Alabama in June. And they did an exceptional job with those official visitors.
Tim, what impressed you the most about how that played out in the month of June and how it seemed like it was methodical, deliberate at the same time? As busy and crazy as it was, it never, to me anyway, and I'm not nearly as connected as you and Joseph and Andrew, but just as a observer on a daily basis, it felt like it was well planned and executed extremely well.
I think you had to see the foresight. It's almost like the end of The Godfather, where he's setting up, where he's killing all of his opponents. That started in April for Alabama, just getting to know these kids. It was a long, it's kind of like a long play. There wasn't a lot. There were some commitments in March, but I think a lot of this was set up for the official visits with unofficial visits, working relationships, visit in the spring, going to the schools. It seems like it happened all at once, but it did not. We were covering unofficial visitors on the regular every day. Sometimes I think it hit triple figures in a week, and it all set up. And then once you did all that work, and again, you can't give the staff enough props for the work they did and the time they put in. And don't forget they're college coaches. They're not just recruiters. They were doing a lot of other stuff. But when it started on June 4th, I think, with Keelan Russell, it's just been dominoes since. I mean, it's just been boom, 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 boom after. And I think that was all kind of set up. I know there was a plan there for these guys. The coaches recruit hard and do all those little things they have to do. But I think all the work was done in March and April, just getting them in March, getting them to agree to come for an unofficial visit. And again, Jackson Lloyd was here like 2 weeks after Alabama offered. So, I mean, they went straight at it. It was kind of funny. It was like, so and so's got to be the first call. You remember that? We saw that on the round table. We were like, everyone's got to be the first call. Every single human being on earth has to be the first call that they like. And of course, Ryan Williams sort of kick-started that, and it's kind of rolled to where we're at now.
Yeah, talk about Joseph, that path to the quarterback, because it was one for the ages, because not just in terms of the 2025 cycle, but you had turnover, really where your 2024 commitment was concerned. You bring in Austin Mack as a transfer from Washington with the coaching change, with Kalen DeBoer, and you get back around to Keelan Russell. It's later in the process, I think we would all agree, than you would typically see at that position. But again, understandable reasons for that with the turnover, the changes, and just kind of where the staff needed to look and feel best about their key target at the position for 2025.
Yeah, it was a hectic time. If you can think all the way back to January, it feels like 10 years ago. But, with the turnover that was happening, trying to keep the players on the current roster in the fold, and, prioritizing Ryan Williams, because obviously, he was the top guy, top recruit at the time. So 2025 wasn't necessarily an afterthought, but you're trying to, make sure that your board is in order. You extend offers to the guys that you want to extend offers to. And, Deuce Knight was one of those ones that we heard about early on. Kalen DeBoer stopped by his school. There was that connection there because his brother played at Indiana for Nick Sheridan. And, there was a little bit of a connection. He knew a little bit about the program. Julian Lewis, USC quarterback commitment, visited a couple times in the spring. He was someone we were watching. And then Keelan Russell, Alabama went out and saw him in the spring, that spring evaluation period. Nick Sheridan saw him on that Tuesday, offered him a day later on his birthday. And he had been planning to visit for the A-Day game on April 13th. So there was communication that was going on before then. But Alabama stayed through it with the process communication-wise. Got that first official visit from him of June. He had already officially visited Ole Miss and SMU to that point. And, that was enough for him. He saw what he needed to see. And Alabama staff, they made it known to him. They wanted him, in the fold at that time. They wanted to jumpstart things on the recruiting trail. And you saw, the domino effect, so to speak, of what his commitment did. So, yeah, and look, Alabama's evaluation was on point with Keelan. Him winning the Elite 11 finals, performing well at another camp. And what he did in his junior season, and the expectations are going to be high for him in his senior year. Can't wait to see how he performs, and hopefully we get to see him at an all-star game too.
And they went Nick Sheridan again. They were very patient with that quarterback position because, I mean, there was people screaming and there were guys they liked, and then they kept doing their due diligence. But again, when he went out in the spring, Nick Sheridan went out in the spring, saw several kids. And again, everybody's committed. Everybody's basically committed. I think maybe Matt Zollers is one of the few that wasn't committed during this when Alabama got here. But Alabama, when you looked at the quarterbacks, when Kalen DeBoer arrived, I feel like every single one in the country was committed somewhere almost. I know the vast majority of them was. So they did a good job of going to see him live. But like Joseph said, when they found their guy, Keelan, they moved all in 100% and made that push.
Very, very impressive. And still, as we've talked about, as we move into July, guys, some big decisions coming up this week in the next 3-4 days here as we get into the second and the third and looking beyond the fourth holiday to the fifth. And Tim, we'll start right there with Caleb Edwards because he's coming up very, very quick. The tight end from Southern California, big, impressive player at the spot, 6'6", 225 pounds. It seems as if our staff and others have jumped on board with Caleb Edwards as being possibly a commitment to the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, we have a prediction for Caleb to end up in Tuscaloosa and RPM, me, Joseph, and Andrew. I'm sure others have done the same. Big kid, like you said. The thing about this guy, you're looking at like Nick Townsend was a tight end target. He's 200 something pounds, 6'2", totally different. More in that Irv Smith maybe kind of range. You look at Caleb Edwards. He's a monster. I mean, this guy's just a throwing alley oops, running down the field, can be an inline blocker, just massive. And also, again, I don't remember this many. Maybe I'm just old and have some form of, I forget everything, but this is another guy that plays defensive line. He plays two ways. We've seen so many of those guys. I feel like in this class, there's so many that play two-way or play multiple sports. And he does both. I think he had 13 tackles for a loss, 7 sacks, something like that. So big physical guy that can run, had good offers. And I'll tell you, I'm kind of impressed because he snuck in 6 official visits. I mean, people line up 6 official visits, but they take 2 or 3 and that thing starts. My boy, he snuck in all 6. So kudos to him. He likes to have a good time and was able to do that. But I think Alabama's did a really good job right here with Caleb.
Yeah, Joseph, just the tight end position in general, it seemed like every weekend we saw a target, at least one, in Tuscaloosa in the month of June. Just kind of give us your synopsis on how we've gotten here and what you're thinking with Caleb Edwards here in the next day or so.
Yeah, so Tim mentioned it before, but those March, April, like those months were crucial for the official visits that were set up because you think about Andrew Olesh, who visited the first weekend of the month. He visited in late March. You think about Nick Townsend, who visited the second weekend of June. He took his unofficial visit to Alabama April 5th. And then Caleb Edwards, he took his official visit June 17th to Alabama, but was on campus for the A-Day game. So a lot of these building blocks for getting them on campus for the official visits and the ensuing high interest was due to those unofficials in the spring. And Caleb took that unofficial on April 13th, but he had visited the Washington staff last year, and he was offered by Washington, I believe, in February or January 2023. Someone can check me on that. But Washington was his third offer to that point. So this is one of those other early relationships that were built, and he had that connection with Nick Sheridan beforehand, who was the tight ends coach at Washington, now offensive coordinator at Alabama. So another one of those connections that goes back to the Washington days that's paying off for Alabama. For this new Alabama staff, Kalen DeBoer, Courtney Morgan, Nick Sheridan and company, as they make the transition to Tuscaloosa, and he thinks really highly of the Crimson Tide and the coaching staff.
Tim, another big announcement coming up here very soon, very quickly. Javion Campbell, a 6'5", 260-pound defensive lineman from Frankfort, Kentucky. You've talked about this in the past too with Kentucky kids, kind of like Mississippi kids. It can be harder than maybe people realize to get them out of Kentucky or Mississippi, but it looks like Alabama very much in this one for the impressive big man from the Commonwealth.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's going to be hard to pull him from Kentucky based on all of our intel. I mean, he's kind of a Kentucky guy. He's got his list of offers. He had a great trip to Alabama. We've talked to multiple sources. Kentucky does a good job. They're sneaky good at 4 or 5 guys. Missouri's another one. Another one that does that. You saw him get Matt Zollers. And we're not just saying it's NIL related. They do a good job of focusing on them, recruiting them hard, doing what they've got to do to keep those kind of guys. And you see them. I mean, you see them every year. They end up pushing their way into guys you don't expect. But I like Campbell, but I think right now Alabama's on the outside looking in.
Yeah, we got a comment here from one of our viewers, Rashad, who says Alabama needs about 2 more DL.
See, I don't think
do you
anybody
think about
knows
that, Tim?
Bama has 2 defensive line commitments. Like, I don't think Alabama fans are aware they've got 2 interior defensive line commitments. We know we had a whole thread. Tell them, Joe, back me up. Hey, we had a whole thread where they're like, you have 2 committed there. Now they, banned it. First of all, there's 14, I think, defensive linemen on scholarship. This was supposed to be a small room, very similar to wide receiver. A couple of guys is what you're expecting, but you do have the bandit position, which is different than the interior defensive line. And they still got a lot of guys they're chasing, but defensive lineman, as we discussed on the last show, if there's a position that can emerge as a senior, You know what I mean? A guy grows 2 inches, a guy loses 30 pounds. London Simmons has lost 40 pounds to get his Alabama offer. There's a lot of things that happen and a long way to go until December. But if Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher taught us anything, defensive tackles can be expensive.
Yeah,
Defensive
and
linemen can be
yes.
expensive.
Yeah.
And this late window in the portal, it was, I've talked about it, man. You talk
Yeah.
about Oregon. There were just some rotational defensive tackles that I think got seven figures to go to some places. So crazy value. Um, so let's talk about it, Joseph, in terms of what you expect, maybe, or you guys expect from Justin Hill. He's been asked about a lot. He's been talked about a lot. Coming up with a decision expected anyway. Obviously the thought being Ohio State with the proximity and some other things certainly could work in the Buckeyes' favor. What are we picking up on that front at this point?
Yeah, I just think it's been very impressive that Alabama's been able to be in this thing as much as they have. You talk about him being out of Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio, Winton Woods High School, strongly leaning toward the Buckeyes at one point. For most of his recruitment, it seemed like had the predictions in his favor for him to end up at Ohio State. But he always had interest in Alabama. He took 2 visits back when Nick Saban was head coach last June, and then for the Texas game, and then returned this year for the spring game, and then also for his official visit June 14th to the 16th. Alabama's, is in the thick of things. We believe it's an Alabama-Ohio State battle. Obviously, the Buckeyes are recruiting at a torrid pace this cycle, number 1 in the country, and by a considerable margin with, some of the guys that they've been able to bring in. But it would be a big pickup for Alabama, just talking about the potential impact of him committing. He's set to make his decision on July 3rd. Ohio State dipped into Alabama, got the top-ranked recruit in Naeem Offord. Be pretty good to go into Ohio and get someone of Justin Hill's caliber. But, we'll see how things play out. But the staff has done a really great job. Once again, as I mentioned with Dawson Merritt, Christian Robinson has done a really good job here. So we'll see how things play out.
Here's the thing, that Ohio State has had a great recruiting class, but Alabama's been pretty nasty in June, right? On3 released their rankings for the teams who did the best in June, and Alabama was number 1. I think we knew that was coming with as hot as they've been. So, but like Joseph said, this has been a good battle, and just to see, I'll tell you what, if you go off the social media, you would think Justin wants to be in Alabama because he has a lot of good times with Jalen Mbakwe, Ryan Williams, the usual suspects.
Another Midwestern defensive target in Damian Shanklin, guys. He's set to announce, I guess, the end of the week. Tim, the sense that you get maybe from that perspective with a guy who looks like, if he isn't a guy that plays Wolf, he can play he can grow into a Bandit or another role like that. Just kind of the feeling with Shanklin here.
Yeah, he's being recruited as a Bandit. He's that big guy. They did a good job getting him in on his visit. This one's been pretty quiet. Even the people we talked to him around him, I think he's still kind of lining up a decision. LSU's the team we hear the most. We've heard Alabama recently, but LSU's the team we've heard the most. He would be that Bandit. They're kind of filling that role. And they've got some other things working at that Bandit position. I think for some reason people think that the end of the cycle is July. I think they're like, we need more 2 defensive tackles. We need a Bandit. They've got 6 months. There's still some recruiting to be done. And if you remember, for Nick Saban, how many times they were like, oh, this class isn't going to be that good. And then they flipped JoJo Earl and half the, 3 Keanu Coote and, 3 or 4 other guys. There's a long way to go in recruiting. Yeah, there's a long way to go in recruiting. And that's both sides. Alabama has to hold on to theirs and try to get theirs. They got to hold on to their own and try to get the others. So there's a lot of recruiting left to be done. Shanklin's probably too early to call. We're still digging into that. But I think Alabama's in it. LSU's in it. I think maybe Ohio State, some others are being mentioned.
Let's get into some Q&A with the viewers out there who, by the way, we very much appreciate you not only tuning in, but tuning in live on a show-by-show basis. The crowds have just swelled to great, great numbers, and we got you to thank for that, obviously. And, of course, the show's archived right there on the YouTube home for BamaOnline.com. Another reason why you need to go ahead, if you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel for BOL. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on those notifications. That way you get all of our YouTube content as it drops right here. And also a thumbs up. We'd appreciate that if you could hit the thumb for us. up as a part of that as well. Sundiata, Bray Boy here, Joseph Hastings. We'll start with you on this one. I like this one. It says, hey, fellas, cool show. We appreciate that. And the question, who is the one player left on the board for Alabama that's not a want but a need in this class? And I'm going to guess there's a couple that fit that sort of descriptive. But Joseph, give us your one need target still out there.
I wish we got this question asked in the early parts of June. I could, say Keelan Russell, some other guys, who ended up joining the fold and look like Nostradamus. I think I'm going to go with Ty Haywood on this one here. I think it would just be a statement recruiting one. I know Alabama was able to do really well with recruiting the offensive linemen, particularly Michael Carroll. That was a huge pickup considering the battle they had to go at with Michigan and some of the other schools involved in his recruitment. But I think Haywood would be just a massive statement for Alabama on the recruiting trail to go into Texas, land a player of his caliber. It would really kind of go to show just how well the staff can recruit in the trenches on that side of the ball, and the dynamic duo of Courtney Morgan and Chris Kapilovic, and would solidify what Tim has kind of been alluding to as potentially an all-time Bama offensive line class in this recruiting era, in this recruiting rankings era. Just on paper, looking at some of those guys that they would be bringing into the fold, Haywood would be the final offensive tackle. You'd have Jackson Lloyd as the other tackle, Michael Carroll and Micah DeBose as the guards, and then Mal Waldrop as center. It'd be just kind of perfect. So, I would probably go with Ty Haywood for that one. I think it'd be a huge pickup for Alabama.
What about it, Tim?
I'm going to go with Caleb Cunningham, and I can say / Khalil Lockett. I think high impact wide receiver. They're not looking for many. Again, we discussed this earlier with the defensive line. Wide receiver room's pretty deep as far as numbers go, but you want one guy. Although I love Latzir Brooks. I think he's everything you want in a wide receiver. He's in that 5'10" range. But you're talking about Khalil, you're getting up there with Caleb and Lockett. Those are both 6'1", 6'2" guys, playmakers. Caleb's one of the best in the country. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, I think he's in the discussion for number one. But as far as I would say more of an explosive receiver, but Caleb will be the one I chose, especially when this offense you're looking at. And you're thinking we got Ryan Williams. You do have Ryan Williams. There's no doubt. But who are you going to put on the other side of Ryan? Caleb would be Caleb would be that double problem you're kind of matching up with him. But I also think Haywood was a great pick as well.
Yeah, two that are hard to beat right there when you talk about, again, a rapidly filling class and the limited number of options that are still out there. Let me ask you guys this one. I'm going to take my opportunity here to ask a question. Maybe not Alabama's highest rated commitment to date. Maybe it's not most under the radar, but most important commitment to this point for Alabama in the 2025 cycle. Who is the guy that you would have in that spot? Joseph, we'll start with you.
I mean, I feel like I'm cheating here going back over to Keelan Russell, but
You're cheating.
Cheater.
Cheating.
It feels like cheating, right?
Joseph's the guy that me and Tim cheated off of, though, back in high school. We tell him to move.
Did.
Hey, Joe, move your hand.
Joseph, I was talking to Joe about his grades in college last night because he'll edit a lot of my stuff for me, and he's very particular with his commas and all that stuff.
Yes.
I mean, he'll slap my knuckles with a ruler.
Called discipline,
Dude's like, yeah, I got like a 3.83. I had 1 B in a class. I was like, I hate you. I hate you so much.
Macroeconomics.
Hey, I also had 1 B.
Joseph
that rest were not
my ACT back in the day. People don't know that.
Go ahead, Joseph. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be Keelan Russell. I mean, I don't think there's any other pick and go for if you have the number one pick in the draft here. Just talking about the most important commits in this class, and you saw it. It was evident almost immediately after. Since he joined the fold, 4 offensive linemen committed. He's been recruiting 5 stars like Caleb Cunningham, Khalil Lockett, Ty Haywood. His conversation with Khalil, even though Khalil had been in touch with Alabama at certain points throughout the year and was offered in January, it was that conversation with Keelan that got Khalil to take an official visit to Alabama. That the reason why Bama is in strong contention for him, and he's recruiting some other guys too. He's talked about that, been very vocal about trying to fill up this class and make it an all-time class. And pretty much, why not Alabama? Why not Kalen DeBoer? So to have somebody like him in a state like Texas, playing against top competition, 6A football. I think Tacorian Moore, number one receiver in the country, his teammate posted on Instagram. He said, Keelan is recruiting too much. He's recruiting him too much. It's been pretty much every day that he's in his ear. So, I don't think you can really understate the importance of him in this class.
What about it, Tim?
Unlike Joseph, I won't cheat. I'll go, and I think this was a perception thing. And if you remember back, can they recruit the state of Alabama? All that stuff. I think Derek Smith was a big one. I think Derek Smith. Yeah. I think Derek Smith's. I mean, Keelan's obviously not cheating. That's definitely a A1 choice. But Derek was the can they get the guys? Can they get this? And at the time was considered an Auburn lock by a lot of people. I also think that we don't talk nearly enough about how talented he is. Partly he's quiet. He doesn't make a big deal about anything. He doesn't talk a lot. His highlight tape is some of the best. I put it right there with Lightzeer Brooks tape as far as fun to watch of the commitments. But I think I gave him some street cred in the state of Alabama. Can they battle? I think that opened up a lot of eyes.
Good answers. I like those. Definitely. Can't go wrong, I don't think, with either one of those. Let's get to some other questions and comments maybe here in the chat, the show chat, which again, we appreciate everybody for taking part in that one. Oh gosh, guys, BTR 90 woke up and chose violence with you two. He said, TR still with the best background of the BOL staff. Step it up, Tim and JoJo. Any chance?
I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I want to do behind me. I mean,
see,
I've got this.
There's TR in there. People are going to think in the username, they're going to think that's a burner, for me.
Right.
Heather, stop trying to make Travis look good on our show.
Oh,
I should have said HR. I should have said HR 90.
It's my BOL birthday, guys. Jeff checking in here. Let's get into some team stuff. Jeff asking, will Damani Jackson play with the first team defense this season? Guys, I would say based on the need that was thought to be there, which is there in terms of experienced corners. Damani during the spring, we certainly saw a lot of with the first team defense at corner. I guess, Tim, I'd be pretty surprised if he wasn't out there with the ones against Western Kentucky, but I also think there's going to be some legitimate competition now with what this staff has been able to put together.
Yeah, I think, we talk about a money year for baseball players when their contract's up. Well, that's kind of what it is when you're Damani. You got a chance to come in, make a big impact. You got a fresh start. You got a fresh opportunity. We know how hard he's working to get on those radars. Probably a guy that's been disappointed with his first couple of years. Very motivated. And we know what a change of scenery. That's not just a cliche. A change of scenery can mean everything for an athlete. A new coach in his ear. But yeah, I expect him to be on the field early. I think that's his intentions. I think he's been impressive so far to the staff. I mean, there is a battle. I mean, you got some young guys over there that are going to battle for those positions, but he's going to have some experience and he's gifted. He's a very talented guy.
Another question here from Elefante. I like that. I like that username. That's pretty cool there. What are the strengths and weaknesses of Kane Womack's swarm defense? Well, we're gonna find out. I'll say this, Joseph and Tim. The thing I'm intrigued about the most is that Husky position and the Wolf to an extent too, because it's easy to look at those spots and say Star and Jack respectively, and going from Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, the rest of the DCs that Nick had, and their approaches to slot corner and outside linebacker. But I think there are definitely going to be some differences in terms of the type of player that they want to use at those spots. Now, skill sets, I think, will align for the most part, but just in terms of what you two have been able to gather through this recruiting process the last 3 or 4 months, talking with different guys, talking with Alabama coaches, in terms of what they're looking for at, say, Husky and Wolf. Joseph, what have you been able to pick up from that perspective as far as the kind of players that they're looking to add there?
Yeah, so you look at Dawson Merritt at that Wolf position, and then Justin Hill, who's also being recruited for the Wolf position. And it's a little bit two different type of roles that they're going to be recruited for, just in terms of Dawson being somebody who can, stand up on the edge, but also drop back, into pass coverage when needed. And And meanwhile, Justin Hill, especially when you turn on his tape, you can kind of see him rushing the passer a little bit more and getting after the quarterback. So that's how they've been positioned just in terms of the pitch to them and how they could both fit into this class and the roles that they would have. I think the Husky position, just the defensive backs in general, that's really, really appealing to the DBs that I've spoken with, how many DBs get on the field and, just the versatility. They're looking for guys who can, play at different spots if need be. And it's very intriguing to these guys. You look at somebody like a Dijon Lee who, his coach told me that he thinks he projects best as an outside boundary corner, but you can kind of see him play at different spots, maybe in that secondary, depending on how his body frame fills out. So just a lot of versatility with these positions in Kane Womack's defense. And based on the conversations I've had with recruits, that's been the thing that stood out to me the most.
It seems like, Tim, though, versatility is a key to all this.
Yeah, I think the strengths are the aggression. That whole, that 3rd and 17 that used to drive people crazy. I think you're going to see a lot more aggressions, blitzes, people come from different angles, people dropping back in different coverages. That's the strength, the aggression. The weakness you have to worry about is giving up the big play. Because when you take all those at that, but I think that's going to be a high risk, high reward type defense. But I think what separates that is the athletes that make up for a lot of that. But I mean, again, you see a backside Domani Jackson coming on a blitz. That's not something we saw a lot of without inching up to the line. But with that kind of speed, you can see him bring. And if you got, say, and these are all hypotheticals, a guy like Duke Johnson can drop back and take away that short pass. So you're going to see a lot of movement, I think. A lot of confusion. I think you're going to see that on both sides of the ball, actually. I think you're going to see a lot of movement and confusion. I know it's going to confuse the hell out of Alabama fans because I'm looking for the breakdown of every play. It's going to confuse a lot of us till we get used to it.
Bama Hudson, you guys want to touch this one? What does a big-time NIL offer look like in recruiting right now? Don't have to name names, but what are some of these teams throwing around in the bidding wars?
Hudson could have asked that on the message board. He tries to sneak in here and catches with. He's
Bama Huddy.
Yeah.
If the username wasn't there, I would have known exactly who wrote that question.
That's exactly. He asked it on the board 50 times. He's like, I'm going to try to trick him live. I think it depends. I think the NIL is hard to explain because everybody's involved. When I say some teams are all in, that means it's a position to them that they want to do anything they can to get. It could be quarterback. If you're in a quarterback situation where you got to have one, it could be defensive tackle, linebacker, outside linebacker. We saw this early on with the linebacker between Tennessee and Alabama in the first years of the NIL. What's happening is it's like an art auction. It's like anything else you're trying to with the talent. It just depends. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? So that's where the value is going to come from. So in the case of Josiah Sharma, Bama had what they needed there where they thought. Texas needed him more and were willing to go a little higher or a lot higher. And Oregon needed him the most. So the deals vary. I mean, I think the quarterbacks will get in the 7 figures in some case. I don't think the Nico Tennessee offer was exaggerated. I mean, a lot of people say, no way. Oh, yeah. He just made a lifetime in a couple of years, a grown-up's lifetime payment in a couple of years. So, I mean, it's hard to pin down. I'm not trying to be evasive or elusive, but it just depends. I mean, it just depends. I mean, a lot of 150s are out there. I think the normal X amount of dollars per month, I think, is the normal for the people on campus. And then it just almost goes to NFL value. And if you look at the NFL, who do they value the most? I think college coaches are going to think the same thing. Offensive tackles, cornerbacks, edge rushers, quarterbacks and cornerbacks, and defensive tackles. The NFL don't value them, but the college coaches love them. They love them in the portal. They love them out of prep school. So it just depends. I think for the most part, they're somewhat normal. But I think we focus on the ones that get crazy, and that's the ones that draw our attention the most.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead, Joseph.
Yeah, if you see some schools where you have some suspicions that they may be going all in on the NIL front in a particular cycle, we have a small sample size, but it doesn't necessarily turn out the way that you'd think it would. So you're always weary of those of those programs where, there's maybe a little bit of some desperation factored into there, when considering the NIL and how much they're going in on a particular class. So, yeah, we'll see how this whole NIL era turns out, what regulations are put into place, if any. But it is it's not a free for all. It's not the wild west with it, but it is kind of close.
I'll tell you this, the one thing that the college coaches, this is what factors in. You've got to balance that locker room. You got to balance your room. If you're the linebacker coach, you can't bring in a guy making, 1.1 million over 3 and everybody else is making 400,000 over 3 years. It's just going to be like a job. Any job you're at, you're in the break room, Bama Hudson, and they're telling you how much you make and you're like, what the hell? And you're running in there and you're demanding more money. There, you've got to balance your whole roster.
Mm-hmm.
You got to balance a whole roster, not just the room, but that. And it's a hard thing to do, especially with parents being told how much value their sons have by people who probably don't know how much they're worth.
Yeah, and there's that dynamic too, because we think about it in terms of the head coach balancing the roster and the players. But he's got to try to keep his position coaches happy too, because if your defensive line coach doesn't have enough defensive tackles going into a season, he doesn't want to hear that we can't go to 900K for a D tackle in the transfer portal, right? He wants that guy right now. Whatever it takes, coach, we got to get this guy to help us. But absolutely, you've got that dynamic of the team dynamic that you got to consider if you're the head coach.
You have somebody balancing your budget. You know what I mean? There's always one, but it's a lot of it's not going to be your assistant coaches. You know what I mean? They're just like, they're like your kids. They're just spin. They're not checking the credit card. Now, somebody is balancing that though, but obviously Oregon has deep pockets and, people still say the bag, it's a direct deposit. There's no more bags. I mean, this is taxable income, I'm assuming. So it's not.
It is.
So there's the NILs out there. I don't have any judgment. If whatever Oregon thought Josiah Sharman was worth, that's what he was worth. And, good for everybody involved, but Bama will have to go in a different direction.
I don't know exactly what schools are paying, but I do have an idea of what some guys have asked between the most recent cycle and the transfer portal. And it's been 2 million's the most I've heard asked at a position. And then I heard 1.5 for a transfer portal defensive player back in April. I mean, and look, I don't know if they're getting it, but I think they're probably getting pretty close to it in this era of college football. Yeah. Guys, again, we appreciate the viewers checking in. Anything else, Tim, before we get out of here?
No, I mean, we're going to have Steve Wiltfong on tomorrow as our special guest. What do we have? 2 commitments, 2 guys deciding tomorrow. Is that right?
Yep.
Javion Campbell and Caleb Edwards.
So we'll have a little discussion on that, but really talk about the class that's been and the class that could be. Haven't had Steve on in a month or so. A lot's happened since then, and look for some other guests. And then later on, we'll have another of these 3-headed monster you're seeing right here.
There you go. It's always a lot of fun right here on the YouTube channel for BamaOnline.com. So again, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on those notifications, please. You'll get all of our content as it drops. And also, we always appreciate a good thumbs up, a good like. That helps us out as well. So with that, for Tim Watts and Joseph Hastings, Travis Reier, thanks again for joining us. And tune back in tomorrow morning. Steve Wiltfong. Will there be any Fong bombs maybe here on the program? We're interested to see how that goes. But all that and more coming up right here on the YouTube home for BOL on Tuesday. Until then, so long, everybody.